benefited illegally from the VBS mutual bank saga must be prosecuted. The party also has dismissed claims that it received any money from VBS. Meanwhile, the South African Revenue Services has indicated that it will investigate whether those who benefited from the proceeds from the VBS looting have been taxed. Did they declare that money? Acting SARS Commissioner Mark Kingon says that they were given the report before it was made public and will act on it. We're joined now by Tiso Black Star Investigative journalist Karyn Maughan. Always a pleasure to welcome you to our studio, Karyn. I mean, this was the moment we were all waiting for. What would the EFF say about the allegations that have been swirling around their deputy leader, Floyd Shivambu? And most of what we heard today, they held the line.
Yeah, I mean, they've made it very clear that they completely reject this suggestion that Floyd Shivambu got money from the VBS looting, as it's been described, directly into his personal bank account. He has admitted that, he and his brother, Brian, pay each other money, but has denied that there's anything untoward about that. Interestingly enough, we spoke to him specifically on this issue of disclosing that his brother had, received money through Vele Investments, which is the majority shareholder in VBS Bank, at the time when Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance had its parliamentary sittings on the VBS issue, which of course were in March and May this year. His brother had concluded a contract with Vele Investment at around 22nd of December. Now, he said that he simply did not know until the VBS scandal emerged now. And as a consequence, he couldn't, that there's simply no issue of conflict, that the EFF stance on the VBS issue has been driven by what they've described as their principal position, that the bank should have been placed under a different form of curatorship where the interests of depositors were more protected and there was a greater chance of recapitalization and the bank actually being saved and those depositors being spared the horror of losing all their money.
They've been drawing parallels, of course, with how the Reserve Bank dealt with the African Bank Limited. But of course, there's a very big difference in the sense that here the Reserve Bank found deliberate wrongdoing. There was intent to loot. I think that's the word that's been used. And hence the report is called the Great Bank Heist.
Well, you must remember that pivotal figures within this have actually confessed to what they've done. They have given disclosures under certain financial legislation that pretty much in this scenario gave them some kind of form of immunity. But they detailed that, certain mechanisms like so-called consulting advisory service deals were used as a way to essentially provide money to people, that municipal officials were bribed in order for municipalities to give their money to the bank, that this money, these kind of blatantly fraudulent incidents occurred, including, as the report found, that Vele Investments fraudulently obtained this majority shareholding in VBS Bank. This really is kind of blunt force trauma crime of the highest level when it comes to fraud. It's blatant, it's documented, and it's very clear from the finances and also from the kind of way in which certain mechanisms that would have allowed transparency of these processes were kind of shut down and not utilized.
I mean, how has the EFF played this? Because part of the explanation we heard from Julius Malema today was that Karyn Maughan is the most dangerous man in the country. It's his faction that's behind all of this. This is how Pravin takes down his enemies. That was the implication. How have the EFF played this?
It's very apparent that there is massive resentment between and antipathy between the EFF and Treasury, and specifically Karyn Maughan. I was outside the Pretoria High Court recently where he did his riotous assemblies court challenge, which of course was not heard. But he, at that stage, was describing Karyn Maughan as controlling Cyril Ramaphosa. We saw this kind of quite extraordinary attack on Mr. Mamayit, who's got a very powerful position within Treasury, that's suggesting that he was not African enough to be in his position. So it's very manifestly apparent that there's incredible antipathy and tension between them. Now, we have yet to hear from Karyn Maughan to really address the kind of allegations that have been made against him. Some of them verging on quite extreme allegations for which at this point the EFF have not produced proof, including that, the rogue unit, which, the Sunday Times have now withdrawn those stories, in fact existed, that they were spying on people, that Pravin Gordhan may or may not have actually been linked to this. So it's a large morass of quite extreme allegations which indicate that this relationship, for whatever reasons, for whatever motivations exist, is in a very, very, very bad place. And I think it'll be interesting to see in the coming weeks and days how Pravin Gordhan reacts to this if he chooses to do so.
Right, I mean, just very, very quickly, a final one. I mean, it was the media that was also blamed, obviously, as you say, Treasury tensions there, and really saying that, look, until you provide me evidence, there will be no disciplinary procedures taken against Floyd Shivambu.
And it's a rhetoric that has been utilized by the ANC before, in the wake of the Istina Dairy Project scandal, where, people like Ace Magashula and Mosebenzi Zwane had shown massive levels of lack of oversight over the money of, poor black farmers. The EFF basically saying in a very similar way that the kind of ethical issue they've brushed aside. They said Floyd simply didn't know. I don't know how likely that is. The DA's John Steenhuisen saying he simply does not believe that. But basically taking the ethics out of it and really saying that the focus needs to be on the criminal justice system, given the sluggishness of that system, given that we haven't seen anyone high profile in a very long time taken on for corruption. It's I think on some level they can be criticized for not actually saying, look, if we've done this investigation, we will make it open to the public, and if the public is not convinced, we will get in independent auditors and we'll present the results of that investigation to the public.
All right, we'll have to leave it there, Karyn, but there'll be yet questions asked, given the fact that they said they had information on Nhlanhla Nene, but here today we're being told not to jump to any conclusions. Karyn Maughan there, Tiso Black Star's investigative journalist, in the studio unpacking that briefing by the leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters. Stay with us. Your sport is next.